Do you have a treasured family photograph that's badly faded or ripped or torn? Fear not, we have a restoration expert on hand to tell us how to save those magic moments. Some of my most treasured possessions are old family photographs, portraits, pictures of loved ones, especially those who aren't with us any longer and give us memories of happy times. But what would you do if your special photos are fading badly or ripped or torn and you're losing them? Can they be saved? Well, here to talk about what can be done in terms of restoration is Sharon Slowey, photograph restorer and owner of Pictorium. Sharon, you're very welcome to the Home Show today.
Sinead, thank you very much. First of all, may I say, would you like a job?
Well, I've described what you do, have I?
You pretty much have in an absolute nutshell. So thank you very much.
Okay, now let's start with what's the difference, because I know that I've heard phrases like restoring old photographs, touching up old photographs, colorizing photographs. What's the difference between retouching and restoring an item?
So you have two sides. You have what we call restoring. And restoring, like the word means, bringing it back. So if you've got an old, torn, damaged, or even cracked or creased photograph, what I do is I bring it back to how it would look originally. So if it's torn, I seamlessly bring it back together. If it's discoloured, I'll balance the tones and I'll bring it back, in this case, to a natural black and white. And again, if it's cracked or creases, or if your child by mistake has got an albino out and drawn all over it, which happens, we'll actually remove all of that. So that's called restoring a photograph, as opposed to retouching, or what I'd like to call airbrushing as well. And that's when, you flick through the magazines and you look at the ladies' legs and you go, good Lord, they go on forever and they're magnificent. But they're not actually really her legs. They have been what we call airbrushed. So as opposed to having your natural looking legs or your natural face, they've actually been touched up and changed. So you've actually been physically altered. And that's what retouching means. It's also when, and we do a lot of this part of it now, is when you're taking somebody out of a photograph or putting somebody into a photograph.
Oh, tell me about that now. What circumstances would you want to take somebody out of a photograph, or would you be photoshopping in a celebrity and taking out maybe an old lover or something like that?
Well, I'd love to be dealing with celebrities, but unfortunately I'm not. But oh my gosh, a gentleman came in and his daughter's only daughter, only child, had graduated, and they got some beautiful photographs of mum, dad and daughter and boyfriend, who happens now to be ex-boyfriend. So of course they didn't want to put it up on the wall, but that's all they had. So he came into me, and I'll never forget what he said. He explained, he said, is there any way that you can take him out of the photograph? And I said, no problem whatsoever. And he goes, do you know what, Sharon, he was a lovely fella. They have split up now, but he was a bit thick. So when he said that, we went, oh, fair enough. So I took him out of the photograph.
He felt he had to explain why he was being chopped out of the image.
That was a real daddy thing to say.
He was doing his job as a daddy, that's for sure.
He was. But with wedding photographs, maybe we're kind of one of the most popular ones. I'm actually looking at my wall at the moment. I'm in my shop and our walls are just full of different ideas. And there was one particular bride who'd come to me, and she'd forgotten to put a particular photograph on the list. And that was a photograph of herself, her mum, and her grandmum. Three generations of the girlies. So what I did was, she brought me in all her wedding photographs. I took mummy out of one photograph, granny out of another, and then the bride out of another, and put the three of them together in the one photograph, so you wouldn't know it had been changed.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Like a little jigsaw puzzle that you're putting together. Now, it strikes me, Sharon, that technology has a big part to play in what you do, because you must be down to granular level in terms of pixels and trying to find the right colours. Tell me a little bit about the techniques that you can use.
Well, it's a bit of a mixture. I'm actually a professional graphic designer by trade as such. So that part of me is, you've got to have a flair for the dramatics and coming up with some beautiful ideas. Whereas restoring a photograph, you've got to be very, very tenacious. You've got to be meticulous. You've got to be patient, because we have humongous big screens here in our shop. So what I've got to do is, if somebody's face is torn in half, for instance, I've got to, as you said, the granular level, we would call down to the very pixel. So I've got to zoom right in and, for want of a better word, knit it back together. So we use a particular piece of software, which is Photoshop. So the first thing we do is we'll scan in your photograph to an extremely high resolution, which means detail. Then I'll get up my screen and zoom right in, enlarge it. And then working by kind of taking pixel by pixel, we start building up the face again. And then after you've done that, then you start working with the tones and the highlights. So if part of the cheekbone is missing as such, I'll take other little elements of the cheekbone and build it up like little building bricks. And then what we do is we blend it all together so you wouldn't know that it was damaged in the first place.
It sounds to me
I
like
hope
you have
that
to be.
explained that okay.
It does, but it makes you sound a bit like a forensic scientist rather than a graphic designer. If you've just joined us, this is Sinead Ryan at the Home Show on News Talk, and I am speaking to Sharon Slowey of Pictorium, who restores old photographs. Now, Sharon, I've had a look at some of the examples of the photographs that you do, and you know, some in particular look beyond repair. Now, you have repaired them; they're stunning, but I wonder whether people realise the extent of damage that is there before somebody can repair it. I mean, anything from really the features being obliterated. How do you go about making sure that, you know, you restore everybody's unique, noses in the right place and ears where they should be?
28 years. That's what I say. It's all about, all genuine, it's all about the experience. I'm blessed to work with the likes of historians, museums, genealogists, and, you know, over the years, and I'm still learning. I would never say that I know everything. Nobody does. But it is a case of, you know, the more and more that you work with photographs, the more and more you start thinking with a bit, I know this sounds maybe a little bit silly, but a different side of your brain. The creative side has to be put to one side as such. And you've got to look at it, you know, from an anatomical point of view. I mean, it's like if you take somebody's eyes, you would automatically think, actually, just copy that and flip it vertically, flip it horizontally, I should say, over to the other side. But if you actually look at your eyes in the mirror, you will notice that one is slightly off kilter, and they will never, ever be center. So once you start understanding the body and the movements and the shapes that we all make, then that's what we actually use to restore and put a photograph back together again. And once you have the understanding, if you're looking at somebody who's looking straight at you and is missing, you know, one arm, which happens on a regular basis, I will then take the other arm, but then I would work with perspective, depth, lighting, shadow, and movement, and then I would be creating their other arm from that. So it is very, very meticulous. It's not something, the software is wonderful, and it's a great tool, but you've got to know how to actually use that tool. And if you don't use it right, it can look extremely unrealistic and also very unprofessional as well.
I can imagine, and it just sounds so detailed. Tell me just finally where you stand on colorizing old black and white photographs. There are some lovely examples you can find on the internet about maybe pictures of old Dublin that people have put in color. It's not always successful, I don't think. Are you a fan of doing that, or just leave things as they were?
I'm not a fan. As you said yourself, it's not always very successful. Now, as I said, you know, I work with, you know, historians and museums, and there have been cases where I've colorized a photograph, but this has taken 3-4 days to do because I go back in research for the exact pigments, the exact colors, and it will take a very long time to do, which it is incredibly costly to do. There are pieces of software out there that, and I hate using this word, but I will because maybe it explains a bit clearer, where it lobs in color. So, you know, it puts in all different types of, you know, I might have more red in my skin tone that you do, Sinead. But this is pretty much blanket. It will do the same. So it'll never come back to how you wanted to do it originally. So we would stay away. If there's something really special that somebody needs, we would only do it if it represents how it looked in the first place.
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense because you just don't want to drench it with colour for the sake of it. Sharon Slowey, photograph restorer and owner of Pictorium, thank you so much for joining us on the Home Show today.